From Fox 8 Sports, this is the Overtime Podcast.
From the Fox 8 studios in New Orleans, this is the Fox 8 Overtime Podcast. I am your host, Sean Fazan, riding shotgun as he does each and every podcast. It's Andre Johnson.
Junior.
Do not forget the JR at the end of the name. It's very important to remember the Junior. Before we get into today's content, be sure to like, share, rate, and review. If you are watching us on YouTube, hit that subscribe button to get the bell notification. But when we drop that fire content, and today it is Monday in the city, but for the first time in this very young football season, it is not a victory Monday, so you might be feeling a little bit down around town because the Saints are coming off their first loss of the season. Of course, that's where we had to go with this Monday pod because we live this week-to-week life, and some Mondays are good, some Mondays are not so good. The Saints are 2-1. That's just the way it is. Before we get into that, Andre, how you doing today?
Feeling good. You know, we were both in the Dome yesterday. It was a very interesting time. I'll say I didn't know that either there were so many undercover Philadelphia Eagles fans in the city, either that or they travel really well as a fan base, because there was a lot of green around the city the last few days and a lot of Eagles fans representing in the Dome.
Yeah, you know, they always travel well. The last couple of times they've played here, they've traveled well. I think 2018 they came twice. Before that they came. I think they've even traveled when they weren't good. Yeah. You know, Philly's a little bit like New Orleans. It's a very local town, so it's like a lot of people that are from there live there, and it's just, you know, you follow your local. Like the Saints fans travel because they got that local connection. So I was just surprised at how many, I guess, Saints fans sell their tickets, or however they get here, because it was a lot of Eagles fans, more than I was expecting, and they were spread out throughout the Dome. But nonetheless, Eagles fans or not, the Eagles on the field did just enough to eke out a victory against the Saints. And of course, that's where we had to go with the big picture today.
Yeah, Sean, there's probably several answers to this question, but we're going to focus on some of the biggest things, and the big picture really comes down to Saints lost to the Eagles. What went wrong?
Yeah, well, that's what we do. I mean, after a Monday that you lose, you examine what went wrong. And look, leave some comments down below, and you can always hit us up on the Final Word feature on the Final Play app if you have some questions. We'll have a few of those here today after we get into the big picture topic here. But leave your comments down below, because I want to know, I want the pulse of what you guys are thinking. Are you fine? Are you a little upset, but you know they're going to regroup? Are you more of the, well, this is who I thought they were going to be all along, it's falling apart, we got excited too early? Or are you just going to wait it out? Just let me know in those comments below, because I really want to get a pulse on where the fan base currently is. As for the topic at hand and the loss that we just watched inside Caesars Superdome on Sunday, once again, a Week 3 victory was in the Saints' grasp, and they let it slip away. First things first, Nick Sirianni. You got away with one, bro. You got away with one, bro. I mean, NFL teams are not supposed to be able to overcome that many head coaching blunders in a game and still win. The Saints didn't exactly outplay Philly, but they certainly made less mistakes than the Eagles, both playing and coaching. So the Saints today have to be feeling a little like, man, we let Nick Sirianni get away with one here and sneak out with a win. I'm not sure if the Philly loses that game with the way that transpired. I'm not sure we're not talking about Nick Sirianni being fired today. I'm not sure he's still the head coach of the Eagles had they lost that game. The Saints win. His decisions were so egregious. But that's exactly what happened, thanks to some situational blunders by the Saints. The Eagles D-line, the dynamic duo of Saquon Barkley and Dallas Goedert. We know this, and we learned it very, very early. Eric McCoy matters.
Yeah.
He matters. We just didn't realize how much so until Sunday. It wasn't just that his replacement was Lucas Patrick was different than Eric McCoy. I actually felt like more than Lucas Patrick struggled, it was Cesar Ruiz that struggled. Clearly, he leans on McCoy, and with McCoy gone and facing that front they were facing, he didn't have that anchor to lean on that he's used to leaning on in the middle of the offensive line. And those two stud first-round D tackles, Jordan Davis and Jalen Carter, finally look like stud D tackles, first-round picks that the Eagles had invested in. And when you add in the fact that the Saints didn't have Taysom Hill, Clint Kubiak, the boy wonder, who has pushed all the right buttons through the first 2 weeks of the season, suddenly couldn't find his way as a play caller. You really just see how hard it is for this offense to get on a roll if they can't run the football. They see, or you see, just how important the line of scrimmage is, and you see how crucial Taysom's mere presence, forget his production, his mere presence matters because it allows them to mask so much and keep defenses on their toes because you're just not sure how you want to play Taysom Hill. He's the only player on the team that gives you that sort of information or that sort of advantage. And it's a very unique advantage. He's the only one in the NFL that really has it. But in saying all of that, and saying that the Eagles D-line beat the Saints O-line, and who knows, maybe the D tackles were better because the interior of the Saints O-line was so bad. Regardless, they were getting picked on the whole first 2 weeks of the season for how bad they've played. They responded in week 3, and they dominated the game. They really did. But regardless of all that, and saying all of that, if the Saints handle two situations, they walk out with an imperfect yet deserved win. The first one, second quarter, sack, strip, fumble by Carl Granderson, who had a fantastic game. I mean, we should be talking more about Carl Granderson. We really should, but we can't right now because obviously we got to talk about the game that just happened. Willie Gay Jr. scoops it up. The Saints have the ball at the 47-yard line near midfield. 7 plays later, it's 4th and 8 from the Eagles' 40. Instead of a 57 or a 58-yard field goal, Dennis Allen punts. Now, we have enough data to track DA with this. And this is the one thing that really I have a fundamental disagreement with Dennis Allen when it comes to this. His natural tendency in those situations to pooch punt instead of kicking a longer field goal. To me, that is an issue. That he's done it several times. He did it several times last year. He's done it now this year. I understand not wanting to go for it because it's 4th and 8, but to me, you got Blake Grupe. He's on a roll. You trust him. I know he banged one in earlier, and it wasn't the cleanest kick, but it still went through. In today's NFL, we have to be able to trust our kicker from 57 yards out. And Blake Grupe is different this year than he was last year, especially in a game, as we watched it all unfold. This is the second quarter now, where points are hard to come by. I mean, neither offense is really doing much. So that's one. But you still had another situation you could have taken advantage of, and it's not too hard to figure out which one it is. The other situation is pretty simple. 4th quarter, J.T. Gray blocks a punt, and the Saints get the ball back at the Eagles' 27-yard line. First off, Jordan Howden, scoop it and score, please. Scoop it and score. Don't leave that up to chance. But nonetheless, still, when you give that offense that had been fantastic through 2 weeks at the Eagles' 27, you're finally thinking, all right, here comes a breakthrough. Here it comes. Put this game away. The Eagles are making too many mistakes. We haven't played great. We haven't played clean, but we're not making as many mistakes as those guys. 4 plays later, 4th and 1. DA bypasses the field goal. Again, in that situation, 4th and 1, I would love the aggression. However, it's 4th quarter. The score is still 3-0. No one's scoring. Points are at a premium. Take the points right there. I said it when it happened. I said, take the points right there. And, of course, AK gets stuffed. You're left with nothing. To not get any points out of either one of those scoring opportunities was an absolute killer. And to me, you just handle one of those two situations better. You're 3-0 right now. Yep. But you're not. So that's where it happens. That's how it goes down. And that's what ends up costing the Saints the game. However, if you believe in this team, this game falling to 2-1, if you really believe where they're at, this is a minor slip up. If you don't believe in this team, maybe there's some cracks in the foundation, so to speak. Maybe they aren't as good as you thought. But here's the thing. You're not going to it's not weeks 1 and weeks 2 are the outliers. It's going to, it's going to be 15-12, but it's going to be difficult. You're going to get a lot of loaded fronts. You're going to get a lot of bare fronts. You're going to get a lot of teams that are going to take away the run now because you've shown you can run the ball. So I'm very, 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 Derek Carr said it best. This is a really good opportunity to see how they respond after some adversity. It's a perfect opportunity to critically look at themselves because first 2 weeks were just magical. It was magic. It was perfection. Now you got to grind it out a little bit, but guess what? That's the NFL. I'm really curious in particular, Clint Kubiak's self-evaluation because he's going to have to adjust now because guess what? 3 weeks, the film is out. you're gonna see the adjustments now, and now you have to adjust. You have to counter, and I'm very curious to see where he stands. What do you think?
They're definitely going to have to make some adjustments, especially for the two big names that didn't really play yesterday, and that's Eric McCoy and Taysom Hill, and that's really where I go in seeing what was the difference between the first two magical weeks and yesterday's struggle of an offensive performance. In the first two games of the season, with Eric McCoy playing center, the Saints averaged 7 yards per play, by far the most in the league. Yesterday, without Eric McCoy, outside of those first 2 or 3 plays he did play, 4 yards per play. That's a big drop. 7 yards per play to 4 yards per play without Eric McCoy at center. Eric McCoy at center, a lot of people, the center doesn't just snap the ball. He's key and pivotal when it comes to communication across the entire offensive line, when it comes to leadership, when you've got a rookie at left tackle, when you've got a young player in Trevor Penning at right tackle, when you've got Cesar Ruiz, who you mentioned, who's used to playing right next to Eric McCoy, and you've got Lucas Patrick at left guard, who is a veteran, but it's his first year with the Saints. And he's really only been here for, 2 months? Ish? So that leadership and having a veteran, not just in the NFL, but on this team really helps. Obviously, you're already thin at the position, so there's really no next man up for center. You move Lucas Patrick over, and thank goodness he's versatile enough to be able to play center. And Derek Carr did mention that he had a few reps with Lucas Patrick in practice, but now you've got to shift things. You've got to move somebody else to left guard, then Cesar Ruiz goes down. Now you got to bring in Saldivari. And, we talked before the season about with the offensive line, it's not when somebody gets banged up, or if somebody gets banged up, it's when. Yeah. Unfortunately, the win just so happened to be the guy who was at the center of it, the quarterback, if you will, of the offensive line. Then you go to the other big injury, Taysom Hill. I look at 2 situations in that game. In the second quarter, the Saints were 3rd and 2. They ran a play, no gain. Who excels at short yardage situations on that team?
One Taysom Hill.
Taysom Hill. You mentioned it later on. In the third quarter, the Saints were 3rd and 1. No gain. 4th and 1. They run it with Alvin Kamara. Instead of kicking the field goal, no gain. Who could have picked up a yard in that situation? Whether you line him up at quarterback, whether you put him at fullback, even if he's motioning as a wide receiver, who helps you in that situation? Taysom Hill. That's 2 key drives where the Saints got 0 points out of, where if you have Taysom Hill in that situation, you could potentially put 7 on the board. So having Eric McCoy, and you see the drop from 7 yards per play to 4 yards per play without him. Without having Taysom Hill, where you've got short yardage situations and you're struggling to convert. That's really what they were missing in that game. And you don't know how long Eric McCoy could potentially out. You don't know how long Cesar Ruiz could potentially be out. You don't even really know about Taysom right now. Yeah. So you've got to start preparing, at least in the short term, for life without those guys.
And as we saw, there's just not is next man up the biggest myth in sports? It's got to be. It's preached, and I understand why it's preached inside a locker room, because you can't be like, oh no, McCoy's injured, we're gonna lose now.
Yeah.
Oh no, Taysom's injured, we're gonna lose now. But let's be frank here, the step down from those guys, whenever those guys. In Taysom's case, there is no one else, and then in McCoy's case, I guess someone else can play. Obviously, other guys can play center, but clearly they're not as good as Eric McCoy. So I think that's the next thing. Okay, I asked DA after the game about how close was Taysom. He said he didn't really. He said, look, we ruled them out, and they ruled them out kind of like they let us know before the actual inactive. So it must have been pretty clear. He said, I'm hopeful to get him back next week. That's huge. I saw the play, I'm sure you saw it too, of Eric McCoy. It looked like he got bent back and almost did a split. Man, I hope that's just some kind of strain or some kind of pull, because if that's some kind of tear, that can be a major, major issue. That you have to really evaluate, okay, what you have at that position, and can you realistically go forward if Eric McCoy is it's the worst case scenario. Hopefully it's just a shorter injury and he's back, hopefully this week, maybe next week, but whatever the case may be, you hope McCoy is back on the field because you saw how much he meant. Now, I will also say this. Not every team is going to have those two beasts at defensive tackle.
Yeah.
But I do think a lot of teams are going to play that bare front, which is you cover all the gaps up front. You basically put 5 across, or I know DA was talking about almost like a goal line 6-1 type alignment they were doing, which basically was saying we're erasing this line. You're not running the ball on the line of scrimmage on us, and we're going to force you to do something else. So we'll see how the Saints adjust to that. This is why football is the best game, because it's like you have to adjust, and the NFL is so good at finding out what you're good at, trying to take it away. So now it's the Saints' turn in the chambers to have to kind of readjust, recalibrate, and see where they go. And they got to play Atlanta this week, who's coming off a tough loss. Probably outplayed Kansas City. Probably could have won that game, but they lose. So they're trying to avoid going to 1-3. The Saints are trying to avoid 2-2. So it's a critical juncture here at the. It used to be the quarter mark. Now I guess it's the quarter plus one mark in the NFL. So how were you feeling? Because I'm still okay with where they're at. I'm still okay. Like I'm not panicking yet, but I do think because they had several opportunities to win that game. They cannot let the week 3 loss derail them like it did last year. They cannot do that.
Yeah, I'm not panicking. I think that was a very winnable game for the Saints. The main area that we haven't talked about that I think they have to be better at this season moving forward, particularly this coming week against Atlanta, the run defense.
Dude, it's
Saquon Barkley shredded them.
And then the ironic thing is they did the one thing that they wanted to do, which is they shut down Jalen Hurts as a runner.
Yeah.
But Saquon Barkley makes a difference when it's – who was the running back last year? It wasn't Saquon.
It wasn't
That's
Saquon.
a massive upgrade for them. And, I mean, he busted that for 65. Is that what it was? Yeah. 65 yards untouched. I mean, they break through. I know there's a little bit of the alignment, but –
the fastest speed from any ball carrier this season.
Yeah, I mean, that guy's explosive, and he makes a difference now. And look, I know the Saints lost a bunch of guys, or they lost McCoy and didn't have Taysom, but the 3rd and 16 play to Goddard, another issue. I mean, that was an issue back in the day with the Saints' dynamic tight ends, but Goddard really came to play. The 3rd and 16 play, they had 2 guys listed that weren't even on the Eagles' website roster. They were, I think, they were practice squad elevations. That's how AJ Brown was out, and Devontae Smith was out. All they had was Goddard and Barkley, and in that situation, they knew it was going to Goddard, and they still got to play. So, look, you can't take one loss and turn it into 2. You got to let that go, but you got to make the corrections, and you got to really hone in on what you did, and you got to really. It's a very harsh lesson in. Okay, we got to win the line of scrimmage, really on both sides of the ball. If you don't win the line of scrimmage, because the first 2 weeks they dominated the line of scrimmage both sides. This week they got dominated.
Yep, and especially with Bijan Robinson coming.
Yeah.
Bijan Robinson, very talented young running back, and he's watching what Saquon did this past week, and I'm sure he's salivating to see that defense. The Saints are going to have to be better up front going into next week. As we go into some fan questions from our black and gold mailbag, we were just talking about a lot of offense a minute ago, so we're going to go with Oliver from Plaquemine, who asks, so what happened? Did Clint call a good game, or did losing our center hurt us? So was the issue Clint Kubiak's play calling and maybe the game script that got out of whack yesterday, or is Eric McCoy just that much of a factor in the
I think the easy answer is both, but I will also say the way those D tackles were playing, they probably would have had their hands full, even with McCoy. They just wouldn't have dominated as much with McCoy because Ruiz obviously would play better. Patrick would have played better. And then you have McCoy, who's the best offensive lineman on the team. So now you're almost like you don't just lose one guy. 2 other guys kind of take a couple notches down. So that hurts. And I felt like it took Clint Kubiak out of rhythm in terms of it took him a while to figure out what they could actually do in the run game. And when you don't have the run game, you don't have to play action game. That's why the rhythm was just so off yesterday, because you see how important it is to running football in the play action game to the entirety of this offense, and you see why, where the weakness is in if you can't do that. I also think they had a little bit more confidence in what they were doing against certain personnel groupings because Taysom Hill wasn't available. So if you're Kubiak and you don't have these guys for an extended period of time or even one more game, you got to do what you got to do. You got to figure it out, man. This is what you're paid to do. So I do think there were a couple of plays where I was like, I'm not so sure about that call. I'm not sure about that call. But I just think overall it felt like he was a little shell shocked, and you can't be like that. You got to regroup, and you got to go and win the game.
I agree. I lean Kubiak because you got to remember Kubiak isn't exactly a 40-year NFL veteran.
Right.
Clint Kubiak is still a young coach in the relative age with the rest of the coaches in the NFL. He's still a young coach.
He's not even 40 yet, is he?
Yeah, I don't think he's 40 yet. And this is his, I believe he was offensive coordinator for a very short stint in Minnesota. But this is one of his first offensive coordinator jobs. It's his third game with this team. He's still learning how to do his job correctly. And that's not an excuse. Everybody in the NFL has a job, and everybody in the NFL is learning. But hopefully, Clint Kubiak takes this game as a lesson. Like you said, they were 2-0 last year. They lost that third game, and things kind of were never the same after that. Hopefully he can learn from this, and this team can continue to keep an upward trajectory.
Beautiful. What's next?
Up next, you actually touched on this one in the answer from the last one. This one from Jaron from the West Bank. Whose absence hurts you more moving forward? Taysom Hill or Eric McCoy?
I mean, it's Eric McCoy because you don't have – I mean, he's a center. He touches the ball every play. And Taysom – he's fantastic, and he's the most unique player in the NFL, but he didn't play as many snaps as Eric McCoy. So just from a purely numbers standpoint, it's McCoy. And, what he does with five guys, obviously the unit, the collective production of five guys with one guy down, obviously it's kind of a multiplier. But at a very close, very, very close second is Taysom Hill because it's just I wouldn't say that if I didn't watch Kubiak the first two games, how much he was using him early in the game because it was so obvious what he was doing. It was like, okay, I'm sending him in with this personnel grouping. How are they going to play him? All right, I'm sending him in with this personnel grouping. How are they going to play him? So it taxes the defense, and then it also gives you valuable information in terms of what you're going to do with certain personnel groupings on the field with that guy. He's the only guy in the NFL that can do that. So he's definitely one of one when it comes to that. So just for the sheer fact of McCoy touching the ball every play, I think it's him. But for this offense to be special, they're going to need Taysom Hill.
I agree. And I also lean McCoy because of the glue factor.
Yeah.
We pointed at this offensive line before the season as their biggest weakness, and it has definitely overperformed in the first few weeks of the season. Even yesterday, Carr was only sacked one time. But if McCoy is out for the foreseeable future, if Cesar Ruiz is also out for the foreseeable future, your starting offensive line would probably look like Taliesin Fuaga, rookie, Nick Saldiveri, second-year player who really hasn't gotten any kind of significant playing time.
Well, he wasn't the first man up when McCoy went down. You noticed
that was
right?
Aliudo.
Aliudo was left guard.
Who didn't have to move probably to right guard.
Right.
You've got, if Cesar Ruiz can't play, Lucas Patrick at center and Trevor Penning at right tackle.
Yeah.
So Fuaga, Saldiveri, Penning, a first year, a second year, and a third year guy. Lucas Patrick, who's been on the team for 2 months, and Aliudo, who's been on the team for 3-4 months. That would be your offensive line. And you don't have the veteran Eric McCoy in the middle of that, holding everything together, being the leadership role that can kind of help those guys play above what they would play without him. And I think moving forward, that would be a bigger deal than not having Taysom. And not having Taysom is an incredibly big deal because we talked about the short yardage situations earlier, and Taysom also helps your offense be less predictable because when he's the joker in the deck.
I think the Eagles had a solid confidence in what the Saints were doing based off personnel groupings because that personnel grouping, there were a lot of times they had Prentice in the game where sometimes they would have Taysom in the game, and it adds a little more complexity when Taysom's in the game. So way it goes. What's next?
Next one from Brandon from Laplace. By the way, I mentioned that was Jaron from the West Bank with the last one. Brandon from Laplace. Will A.T. Perry or Mason Tipton ever emerge as the third receiving threat that the Saints desperately need?
This is a good question because they haven't needed a third receiver threat the first two wins. Yeah. I've said it before. They spent so much time with two receivers, and either two tight ends or two backs, either 21 or 22 or 12 personnel. The traditional three receiver set with the tight end in the back, 11 personnel. They haven't had to do that much. Well, they had to do it in this game because, like I said, Kubiak's trying to figure it out, and I think what ended up happening was at some point They were able to get a little bit of production based off of that 11 personnel because it kind of softened it up a little bit because they had to spread out a little bit against, I guess, that really active front they were facing. The answer is I don't know. A, they don't use the third receiver nearly as much as other teams in the NFL. But B, and I'll throw Cedric Wilson in there as well. A.T. Perry's been inactive.
Yeah.
He's been a healthy scratch. Bub means healthy scratch. Mason Tipton's kind of been the third guy. In passing situations, I think he had two catches or
two catches for like 9
and another
yards.
target. I think he had another target in the Dallas game as well.
Yeah.
Wilson had a catch, but it was more kind of a throw. He's become more the crack down, toss, crack, block guy. So he's actually, when he gets in the game, it's almost like you almost feel run because he's a really great run blocker. So the answer is I don't know. No one has emerged because they haven't really needed it. But there's going to come a time where they're going to be behind in the game. They're got to come back and start passing. So yeah, someone has to emerge, and I still think that's very much up in the air. Based off of snap counts, it's been Mason Tipton, which is crazy because he's another smaller guy playing that third wide receiver role. But based off of what we thought in preseason and training camp, it was Cedric Wilson. I think A.T. Perry is way behind those two guys.
Yeah, and A.T. Perry is the one that Dennis Allen was really challenging in the offseason, saying he wanted to see more out of him. And someone I want to see more out of, as we have about a minute left to go, is Rashid Shaheed. I know we're talking about, wide receiver number 3s, but Rashid Shaheed, he has been phenomenal going deep. Before the season, we knew Rashid Shaheed could get behind the defense. We knew that he could burn you. I heard that Rashid Shaheed was going to show off this expanded route tree this season, and so far we have not exactly seen it. Chris Olave, especially yesterday when the offense struggled, Chris Olave was there. I want to see more of Rashid Shaheed running more than just the post routes and the deep streaks. I want to see him really get jiggy in the middle of that defense.
Yeah, he had 2 chances in the end zone yesterday. I would have loved to have seen him come down with one of those. I know they were both 50-50 balls and contested catches, but that's the next stage of his development. A contested catch, not just blowing by everybody, but making a contested catch because they really, really, really could have used it. We could have used the win, but it didn't happen. But we're out of time now. So for Andre Johnson Jr., I am Sean Fazan. We'll catch you guys next time on Overtime.